Hello, all, and thank you for joining me yet again for another haunted edition of On the Road with Vincent, coming to you today atop Handy Mountain Road between the Claudeville and Dobbins communities of Patrick County, Virginia. I've truly been looking forward to filming this video for some time now to share with you some of the haunting stories I've been told throughout my life about these mountains, and some that I can personally attest to as well. First off, I do apologize for the lighting and shakiness of this video. I'd been wanting to shoot this on a more cloudy and dreary day, but the one chance I had to film, it was naturally the brightest day of the year. And as for the shakiness, please bear in mind, this is on a very loose dirt road, and was filmed after multiple heavy rains throughout the area that has washed many spots of the road out. But all that aside, please sit back and enjoy this spooky and macabre history of Handy Mountain Road. Coming in from the Dobbins end, your first mile or two will have you climbing the steepest section of the road, with multiple sharp hairpin turns and very steep drop-offs on either side of the road. While I do hate the recent clear-cutting that's taken place on this side of the mountain, it does offer some outstanding views of the surrounding area. Geographically, Handy Mountain sits at the junction of Pikes Mountain and Willard Mountain in the Dry Pond area, but was locally dubbed Handy Mountain after the Handy family that once lived atop this very mountain. Down below in the valley between Pikes and Willard Mountain lies the abandoned remains of a once decent-sized community. Now only 2 private access roads and a couple smaller walking paths allow entrance to the valley, sealing it off from the rest of the world. This road on the left is one of those 2 access roads. In the heart of the valley lies a barren field that was once the location of an Indian camp up until about the early 19th century. Many of the old houses still stand throughout the hills, as well as the remnants of one of my grandparents' old houses, which is now just a lone chimney standing in the midst of the woods. This house belongs to what many considered the second most evil man in the valley, whose son drank Red Devil Lye in an attempted suicide, then upon release from a psychiatric home successfully killed himself rather than return home to his father. The rusty remains of this vehicle once belonged to my grandfather, but now somebody has eerily placed a deer skull on top of it. Numerous family cemeteries are scattered along the hillsides, including this grave belonging to my great-grandfather, who is pictured here on the right. Now remember this other man on the left, though. He'll be important to our stories later. I do believe the creepiest of stories, though, are attributed to the local legends of a cryptid monster which once roamed throughout the mountains. Many locals say that it behaved such as a cross between a mountain lion and a bear, screaming like a woman in the middle of the night, mocking the sounds of babies crying and other animals, but able to walk on its hind legs. My grandfather claimed to have once shot at the beast, but missed. It was also said to have stalked and chased his uncle throughout the hills late one night. While reports of the beast died out with the community in the mid-20th century, there still remains an eerie feeling and silence looming throughout the valley. Back on top of the mountain now, I can share with you one of my own personal accounts of terror that occurred 10 years ago this very summer. My old friend Claude, whom I've mentioned before, and I decided to go to the local swimming hole and took a scenic route through Handy Mountain. We had just passed by the Arrington Cemetery, shown here on the left, discussing the creepy feeling this road can sometimes bring for whatever reason. We were driving in my brand new 1989 Ford Taurus, coming around this very curve, when out of nowhere it felt as though somebody ripped the steering wheel right from my hands, pulling me right towards the cliff. In a panic, I overcorrected and the car began fishtailing. I slammed on the brakes and said a quick prayer as I lost all control of my new car. After doing a complete 180, flinging gravel in every direction, the car finally came to a complete stop. My bumper was hanging completely over the edge of the cliff, my tires just mere inches from going over at this very spot. While we most likely just lost traction on a patch of loose gravel, it still put me off driving this road for some time. While it does make a great story now, we could very well have not made it out to tell it. And while it may not seem as though now, this community was once large enough to support a rather large school for the area at that time, which did sit atop the mountain. Now coming up here on the left is a small valley which locals once referred to as Haunted Hollow, and for yet another creepy story of my own, one day earlier that same year as my other incident, I decided to take an old friend to the cemetery in the hollow to show her the grave of another great-grandfather of mine. As the sun started to set, knowing all the stories I'd been told throughout my life about the area, I'll admit I got a bit nervous and decided it was time to go. While the disembodied laughter and voices we heard next were most likely just being echoed from one of the surrounding mountains, we both clearly heard the words, "Don't leave yet," and at that time, that was all the reason I needed to get out of Dodge. Other reports of locals throughout the mid-20th century were seeing strange balls of light or fire flying throughout the hills at night, to seeing ghostly apparitions walking or running throughout the hollow. My own grandmother even recalls of a terrifying event in which what she now assumes was ball lightning entered from an unknown point after a storm and zigzagged throughout the house until going out an open door, somehow avoiding any object that's in its path. Probably the most fascinating tale of Haunted Hollow, though, is that of a mysterious murder which took place in the very early 20th century. Now remember this man on the left that I mentioned earlier? He was also a relative of mine, and it was said that he was a witness to that murder. Now over the years I've heard many varying stories concerning the murder, such as the victim being buried underneath his house to being burned up in a pile of firewood. I'm not sure what the truth of the matter actually is, but it was apparently so shrouded in mystery that the FBI allegedly came up to this little mountain community to investigate the murder to no avail. All those involved or who knew anything about the matter, including my relative, kept silent up until their deaths. If I remember the stories correctly, as my relative was on his deathbed, he was surrounded by those who were involved, and they made sure he didn't speak a word about the incident until his dying breath. Throughout the years after, are when many people started giving accounts to what gives the hollow its name. My dad has often said how, growing up, his father always acted overly nervous when in the hollow at night, to the point of both of his parents scolding them for pointing flashlights in the sky or leaving the room during a storm. While I've since gotten over my uneasy feelings on this road, to this day it still remains a road my dad tends to avoid at night. The area has definitely had its fair share of stories throughout the years, and still does carry a haunting aura with it at times, but it is still a beautiful road nonetheless. one of the very roads I learned to drive on and still take rather frequently today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of On the Road with Vincent, Haunted Edition. As I said, I've been looking forward to making this episode for some time now, and I'm glad I finally got to share it with you. If you would like me to return here at night, maybe with one of the other band members, let me know in the comments below, and maybe we can do a mini ghost watch or something and see if we experience anything for ourselves. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon.